The morning sun cast a golden hue over the skyline of Silicon City, where the future was built not in years but in weeks. Inside the gleaming tower of Innovexa Technologies, tension hung like a storm cloud. The company's most ambitious project, a revolutionary health tech drone capable of delivering life-saving medication in disaster zones, had failed for the 25th time. Engineers, coders, and roboticists, each with degrees from MIT, Stanford, and beyond, stood frozen, their eyes fixed on the now silent screen. Dead again. The deadline was 3 days away. The government contract, the funding, the hope of changing lives, it was all slipping through their fingers. In the lobby, unnoticed and sweaty, stood Arjun, a 19-year-old delivery boy wearing a faded red jacket. He'd been delivering lunch to the team for over a year, always with a smile, always on time, often ignored. Arjun had no college degree, no polished shoes, and certainly no credentials in drone technology. But what he did have was curiosity, a lot of it. Every time he waited for signatures or change, Arjun would stare at the whiteboards filled with equations and diagrams. He'd sometimes whisper ideas to himself, questions no one heard or cared to answer. But today, something in his chest tightened. A voice within whispered, "Say it. You might never get another chance." As he turned to leave, he paused, then spun around and walked up to the glass doors of the tech floor. One of the senior engineers, Maya, was rubbing her temples, exhausted. He hesitated before knocking lightly. She looked up. "I'm sorry to interrupt, ma'am," he said nervously. "I know I'm just the delivery guy, but I think I know why the drone's failing." Maya blinked. A few other engineers looked up, half annoyed, half curious. "What did you say?" I've been watching. I mean, not spying, just noticing. You're using a dual-rotor stabilization algorithm, right? But the terrain sensors are reacting slower than the GPS recalibration. It's creating a lag, and when the drone tries to hover mid-flight, it jerks and crashes. Silence. "You're saying our $1 million AI isn't syncing with the basic terrain feedback loop," a voice scoffed from the back. "I think, if you reverse prioritize the sensor hierarchy and use predictive throttling from the ground-up signal strength, it might stabilize," Arjun said, voice shaking but sincere. "That's how I balance my bike when my phone GPS fails. I don't wait, I predict." A few engineers chuckled. One muttered, "Unbelievable." But Maya didn't laugh. She stared at him as if seeing him for the first time. "Come with me," she said quietly. In the next 2 hours, something unimaginable happened. Arjun stood in a corner, guiding with trembling hands as Maya rewrote lines of code. A junior engineer simulated the predictive feedback loop. They ran a new test. The drone hovered. It didn't shake. It didn't crash. It moved. Perfectly. Then it soared. Cheers erupted in the lab, loud and stunned. Some clapped. Others just stared at Arjun in disbelief. He was sweating, but his face was lit with a strange calm, the kind of peace that comes when the world finally hears the voice you'd long buried. That evening, the CEO of Innovexa, Mr. Raymond Clark, was called in. He was a man of numbers, contracts, and precision, but as he watched the replay of the successful test, he turned to Arjun with moist eyes. "You solved what we couldn't. Who are you?" Arjun looked down at his worn shoes. "Just a delivery boy, sir." Clark shook his head. "Not anymore." The story spread like wildfire. Delivery boy fixes elite drone tech, when 25 engineers failed. News channels picked it up. Social media platforms exploded. Arjun's photo, standing shyly beside the drone, went viral. People called him a genius. Some labeled him a prodigy. But he didn't feel like either. When asked in interviews how he figured it out, Arjun would smile and say, "I just cared." And that was the truth. While the engineers had seen it as a project, he'd seen it as a lifeline. He remembered the year his younger sister had died in a flood-hit village, where medicine never arrived in time. He remembered sitting beside her, helpless, as her fever burned through the night. That pain never left him. So when he learned what the drone was for, he made it personal. He watched. He learned. Quietly. Selflessly. And when the time came, he spoke up, not for glory, but for every forgotten village, every child who might get that medicine in time. In the weeks that followed, Arjun was offered a full scholarship by Innovexa and a position on their R&D team. But he asked for something different. I want to study. Properly. But also, I want to teach kids like me. Who don't have degrees but have minds full of dreams. Clark agreed. Innovexa partnered with Arjun to launch Project Spark, a training initiative for underprivileged youth in technology, problem-solving, and design thinking. Within months, dozens of students from across the country joined. They weren't top of their class. Some had never even used a computer. But they had fire. And someone who believed in them. 1 year later, Arjun stood on a TED Talk stage in New York City, dressed in a simple black blazer, holding the now patented drone. The audience was packed, scientists, teachers, entrepreneurs. But he spoke like he was talking to a child sitting in a small Indian village, wondering if the world would ever see them. I was never the smartest, he said. I didn't know big words. But I paid attention. I asked questions. I believe that if something is broken, it can be fixed, even if you're not the expert. What the world needs isn't always genius. Sometimes, it just needs someone who cares enough to try. As the room stood in a thunderous standing ovation, Arjun bowed his head, not out of pride, but humility. Because he knew something they didn't. The real miracle wasn't that he solved the drone. The miracle was that, in a world quick to label, dismiss, and underestimate, he was heard. In the end, this story isn't about engineers failing or a delivery boy succeeding. It's about listening, to those without titles, to those on the sidelines, to those with stories that haven't been written yet. It's about realizing that brilliance doesn't always wear a suit. Sometimes, it wears a helmet and rides a bike. And it's about hope, that in the vast, noisy world, even the quietest voices can spark the biggest changes. Because when kindness meets courage, the impossible bends, and the world watches in awe.